I'd like to welcome you to this Lunch and Learn for the Razorback Marching Band. It is a really good opportunity to catch up with the program and see what it's actually like during working through COVID and trying to have a marching band program. So we're thankful that you joined us. My name's Robert Hopper. I work in the Fulbright College Dean's Office in Development and External Relations. About 15 or so, 20 so years ago, the Razorback Marching Band was kind enough to let a kid from BB hold a saxophone, and I have been grateful ever since. So a little bit of past there, but we will have a question and answer session towards the end of our time together. If you want to put that and not forget it during it, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and J.R. Hinkson, the Director of Operations, will be monitoring that and pitching those questions as many as we can get through at the end of our talk. So if there's any questions, send them to the chat and we can get to those. But I really just want to ask Chris, before we get started, to introduce the newest member of the band program.
Thank you, Robert, and thanks everybody for being here, and a special thank you to Alumni Association team for inviting us to do this. The week before our university switched to online instruction so abruptly, we learned that our previous assistant director of bands, Dr. Jamal Duncan, had accepted a new position at Arizona State University. We're very happy for him, and we anticipated that was coming. We knew that it's our loss, and it's definitely their gain. But we knew that we'd have to scramble really quickly to begin a search at that point. We were in the first week of March. On Monday of that week, we learned that we would probably go to online instruction later that week or soon after that. So we actually received permission to begin a national search on the day that we received word that we were about to close the university for instruction. So we scrambled. We were very fortunate to get permission to do a national search, which went very well. We had a very good pool of applicants. And at the time, the person that emerged from that pool of applicants was Mr. Jeff Summers, who was a doctoral candidate at the University of Miami in the Frost School of Music. We're very fortunate that he accepted the position, and he's doing a terrific job with us. He's now Dr. Jeff Summers, and we're very happy to welcome you here, Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah, what a crazy time to start a new gig and move across the country. When I logged in earlier and I saw Robert, I didn't know Robert had a chin until about 15 minutes ago. It's like, I've only ever seen him with a mask on. And so, yeah, it's just really strange. But man, like, I am so happy to be here in Northwest Arkansas. My wife and I moved at the end of June after spending 3 years in Miami. And I'm already enjoying the fact that we have seasons here. Like, I don't know if it ever got in the 50s in my 3 years in Miami. And like, I've got that every morning the last couple of weeks. So it's been great. And I love events like this because it reminds me of like how wide a net an organization like this casts, and seeing all these faces and names. Man, I'm very proud to be here. I'm slowly learning how great of a city Fayetteville is, and I'm very thankful for Chris and Ben's leadership, and getting me up to speed and kind of laying down the path for how things are done. So it's been really great. Students are fantastic. Some of the best student leaders I've ever seen, and so I'm just I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you, and we'll swing back around to Jeff to talk a little bit more about Hog Wild. But we want to focus now just on Chris. Could you give us some background on, after the university closed, what kind of planning and what kind of situational things was the band put in?
Sure. I know that a lot of you have heard a lot of details. I think we're all COVIDed out at this point. But I just want to do a very quick overview of what we've done. Not as a review of those details, but primarily to let people know what a terrific job that Ben and Jeff and J.R. and Connie Vick in the band office and the entire staff have done. They've done great work to prepare for the athletic bands, for everything in the program, the Epley Band building, and especially more than anything else, just to let you know what a good job they've done, but also I think that this will help set up a lot of the decisions that you're going to hear about and perhaps see if you're at the game on Saturday. As soon as we switched to online instruction, while we're doing the search that would ultimately hire Dr. Summers, we began an overview of as much information as we could. We were looking for information about research, data from any programs that we could find. We were looking at what some public schools were doing, other universities. Ben and Jeff will share more specific information about how that impacts each ensemble and how all of this has translated into that. We were tracking data from the CDC, the Arkansas Department of Health. We were having regular Zoom meetings with other SEC band directors as well as other professional organizations. There are two major research studies going on at this time. One at the University of Colorado that will have a mirror study done right afterward at the University of Maryland. There's another one at Colorado State. Colorado State has basically it's an office of the CDC West. They have a human emissions lab, and both of those sites are doing extensive research on airborne transmission of particles from talking, singing, and that kind of thing. We knew early on that this, even before we closed, we had already heard that this would be transmitted through airborne particles. So any of you that have been in band or around band know, just think of anything in a typical day of band, and it's going to hit everything that we do. When we're sitting in the stands with 350 people, we're not just talking, we're yelling, we're screaming, we're sitting right next to each other. We're having meals before or during the game. If it's an out-of-town game, we've got 350 people on 7 buses for several hours. We're staying in hotels. We knew that this was going to roll into a lot of information. So these folks started tracking a lot of this. We learned very on from the athletic department, even by the end of March, that there would be no travel for any of the bands this year. And so that immediately switched our thinking a lot about things. The data that we heard from Asia and Europe and from early data from the research studies in this country all pretty much agreed that we're 20 times more likely to catch coronavirus indoors than outdoors. So that immediately shifted our thinking a lot. I'll also tell you a little bit about what's going on with the Epley Band building after this, but as a result of that information, we started looking at airflow studies. We contacted facilities management on campus and started trying to figure out the exchange rate of air in our rehearsal rooms inside. We also started doing as much research as we could into masks, what kinds of masks, gaiters, plexiglass shields. We're using bell covers in rehearsals and games. All the instruments are covered. We've looked at different types of disinfectants so that we can get major touch points or traffic points in the building disinfected between classes. We've purchased fans. We ended up spending a significant amount of money on PPE and things that we could do to help protect the students. Ben and Jeff in particular did an extensive amount of work on trying to figure out how we could do contact tracing within the band, including what classes, where they live, who are their roommates, what's your social group, a whole matrix of things. Then we also started to think about what does game day look like? We rehearse in the pavilion. Can we actually use the pavilion? Can we use the restrooms? How are we going to feed the band box lunches? Or should we go into the hyper? Things like when we finally figure out we have a positive case in the marching band, what is that going to do to a regular rehearsal situation? So all of that work was a constant, there was a constant list of changing protocols, guidelines, like we've all heard of in our workplaces. But I have to say, again, Ben and Jeff did such a great job with this, but the students have been extraordinary. As you would expect band students to do, they've done exactly what the staff and faculty have asked them to do. I also want to say that Ben and Jeff have really done the lion's share of work on research on how to put all this information into place for the bands. I actually have had the easy part related to the Epley Band building because all of our policies about the band building actually can be taken down to one word, which is nope, no. The band building is very quiet. If you've been on campus, you know that there are very few classes that are meeting face-to-face. Normally the band building is in full use from 7 a.m. until about 11 at night. And I only know of one class that's meeting regularly here, and it's a very reduced size class. So we've told the students the lobby is closed. There's very little traffic, and the marching band, for example, will not ever meet indoors this entire fall semester. So that's kind of the background of this. Robert, I'll throw it back to you, and we can hear some more specifics about the bands.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That is a lot of stuff that I think you never thought you'd cover as a band director. But thank you for taking all the hats on. Ben, when you look at the guidelines from the SEC and the Arkansas Department of Health, like how did that affect everything that you did in planning for the fall?
Well, so one of the things that as a band program, evaluating what we do and looking for ways to change and to continue to grow, that's not anything new. We do that, every year. 2 years ago, we had a really great year. And, not only did we talk about what worked or what didn't work, but even after having such a great year, we all sat around with students and staff and just said, how can we make this experience better? And we made a pretty big overhaul of a lot of the things we did. We got rid of anything involving paper. We went digital, and that was a huge change. We added uniforms. We really changed a lot of how we operated as a band. And this year was supposed to be a year where we kind of enjoyed all of the work over the past couple of years, and we were going to take it easy. And so little did we know. And so really this year has forced us to evaluate every single aspect of how we operate. And so we knew going into this year, we knew that there were things that were going to be decided for us, and then things that we were going to have control over. And so the challenge was waiting for all of those decisions that were going to be made for us to take place, because they didn't all work on the same timeline. So the SEC took care of a few things. They set some guidelines and said, okay, this is what you can and can't do. And then that allowed us to go to our next level of guidelines, which was the ADH. And so we worked with the ADH, and once they released their guidelines for bands, then we made sure that we were following both. But that really, those two plus the university has really affected everything we do. Most of it coming from the SEC and the ADH. I think our athletic department and our university have been great, that they've trusted us to make the decisions that are in the best interest of our students and our program. So a lot of what we've heard from the university is, okay, we'll trust that what you're doing, just share how you're reaching these decisions with us.
Well, and I do want people to know, like, because of that elongated decision process from the state, the SEC, and the university, you just didn't have one plan. You had multiple plans.
Absolutely. I felt like we felt like a famous politician where there's a plan. We're just saying we don't know what that plan is, but we have a plan for this. Whatever scenario, we pretty much had a plan for. And that's what I would tell the students. It's just, we know what we're going to do, but we just don't know which of the 10 or 12 plans we're going to put in motion. And that was a little bit of the scary part where, there wasn't a whole lot to communicate, but we still had about, 5 or 6 really solid scenarios that were going to dictate how we operated this year.
Absolutely. And I kind of just want to think of, what is it like to be in the R&B now on a weekday rehearsal? Like, what does your rehearsal schedule look like? Just the days and hours you practice, and what are you doing in them?
It's a very interesting experience. We hope that at the core, it still feels like, everything you knew and loved about the R&B. I mean, that aspect of camaraderie, of friendship, of making music, of marching, all of that is hopefully the same, but how we go about it is completely different. The R&B this year is operating like 2 bands. We're split up into red and white bands, and we're splitting up the time between those 2 bands. So right now we're rehearsing Tuesday and Thursdays. We're lucky to have a big parking lot to operate, and so there are 2 different locations. And so one band knows that on this day they're on this location, and then one band knows that on this day they're on the other location. So It's two separate bands. They had been operating completely separate. They were set up by cohorts. So we try to get all of the roommates, co-workers, best friends, significant others, everybody paired up into the right band, but still keeping a balanced instrumentation and a ability level. And so those two groups have been operating, separately until last Tuesday, where we kind of put them together, but we all rehearsed in the same field, but still separate. So the two bands never crossed the 50 and remained, in those cohorts. So we were able to put a music rehearsal together, and that's what we're going to be doing in the stadium today, trying to record some of our halftime, some of our pregame music in there.
And what are y'all doing? I mean, I know that most of us have heard that SEC marching bands will not be on the field this year. So how have you managed to keep kids engaged through the curriculum?
Well, we're still, one of the things we talked about as a staff and as students, we wanted to do some marching this year because we're a marching band, and we didn't want a whole class of students to go 1 year, not only to not having the opportunity to march, but not learn things like our pregame and things that are, part of what makes us the Razorback band. So we're learning our pregame show. And the plan is we're going to march that sort of for our own benefit for the students so that they still get that experience, because, marching that A and making those diacs, it doesn't get any easier. And so even though we're not doing that this year, the practice is still good. And as you all know, high marching, again, that doesn't get any easier. And so we want to keep those skills up. So we're learning pregame, and the goal is to record that in the stadium outside of a game, and then be able to share that with our fans or supporters, alum like you all, over our online platforms. And then we've shifted to a more musical ensemble. So we're doing everything that we've done in the past musically from the stands. So you'll hear the pregame show, you'll hear a halftime show, it'll all be from the stands. And then the marching is part of the curriculum, but again, it's going to be shared with the public in different ways.
And as we move into playing Georgia on Saturday, what is that going to look like for a game day for the R&B?
Well, one of the things, R&B members, former members here, you all know that game day involves a very early start. So we normally will begin game day 6 hours before kickoff. And that's because, not only do we have a practice, but there are a lot of tailgating events and all these, they're pretty much by the time the band gets to pregame, we've worked, about half a day. And so with all of that stuff not happening this year, we start 3 hours before kick. We have our normal rehearsal, and then you're going to see the band take up the full seating section that we had in the past. However, that's going to be socially distanced. So that's going to be about 92 seats. One of the things that you'll see that we think is really cool, we think it's something we didn't expect, but we've been able to split the color guard and the twirlers, and they're going to be with cheer and pom on the north deck. And there's actually going to be a lot of space to spin and twirl. So you may see an element during game day that you haven't seen. So one band is going to be in the normal area, or part of the band. And that's going to look very similar to what you've seen in the past, just less members and with more space. And then you'll also see that other visual contingent of the band on the north deck that you'll see on the video board and will be involved throughout the game in that capacity from there.
Ben, how many times can a student expect to participate in an in-game experience?
Well, so we have 92 positions plus the 20 or 22 other positions that we can use for guard and twirlers. So we've taken half a band and we've split it up into a rotation system. So for example, the color guard and the twirlers, they don't have to switch. They have ample space for half of that section to do a full game. The drum line is going to stay there for the full game. A few select section leaders and seniors will stay for the full game. And then at halftime, you'll see some new students rotate in and out of the seat. So some of the students will leave at halftime. Over the course of the year, up to our last football game, which is, that's still kind of a work in progress as the school determines how the rest of the semester is going to look like. But each Razorback band member will get at least one full game, with some getting two.
Mm. And I mean, just to peek into, like, what would y'all actually do if there was a positive in a section of one of the cohorts in band?
Well, one of the things, the university has a system in place where we would be notified as faculty, and then anybody that's deemed a close contact with that student would be notified and would then quarantine or get tested. The way we are operating, so for example, operating as two bands, let's say one person would test positive in one group. Well, we're only looking about half of the band that we need to start to think about contact tracing. And so, you know, in a lot of situations, we call them the different bands, red and white band, one band wouldn't necessarily be affected. So we start to look at this band. You know, I know there are a lot of guidelines when it comes to HIPAA and procedures where we can't talk about it, but we follow all of that as faculty, but we found that our students are very open and willing to share that information. So if, you know, somebody were to test positive, they would pretty much already alert anybody who they've been in contact with. So we've had other students say, hey, I know so-and-so may have been exposed or get tested. You know, what's our best plan forward? And so we've allowed students to take extra precautions. So, you know, we came up with a sort of a flow chart, a decision chart. Okay, if this happens, do this. And if that happens, do that. And we had some help even from within students in the band. One of our students did an internship with the University of Wisconsin-Madison and their city and their outreach program, where they developed one for the state of Wisconsin. And so we had some help putting things like that together. So we've been able to do some contact tracing in-house and help, and then following what the university has set in place.
It was going so smooth. We've been talking about football. I want to change the gear a little bit and move to Jeff and talk about how is Hog Wild looking with volleyball has already usually started, and we're getting closer to when basketball would usually start. What's the situation on the ground there, Jeff?
Yeah, we were all like ready to go, and then volleyball decided they were going to punt and move everything back. So if you haven't been following along with the NCAA announcements, volleyball has moved its championships to the spring. And so the SEC has decided they're going to play some matches here in the fall, but there are also going to be volleyball matches in the spring, which will definitely change the landscape of what our spring semester looks like. But we're going to have 4 matches on campus, and they're going to be back-to-back days. I think the first one is October 31st and then November 1st, and then against Ole Miss, and then 2 weeks later, a Saturday-Sunday set against Texas A&M. We still are waiting word from athletics on what the game atmosphere is going to look like, both in terms of Barnhill at volleyball at Barnhill and basketball down at Bud Walton. You know, I don't really envy those guys over in athletics right now. They've got their hands full trying to figure out how to make a football game work. But the plan is to start talking more about volleyball next week with athletics after we get this Georgia game under our belt. But our hope is to still be participating. It's nice. Hog Wild is already kind of set up where we have the red and the white bands, so that's not new to us. It might be a situation where, you know, we have red and white, and maybe we split it again in half. So, you know, we have 4 different bands, and over the course of these 4 volleyball matches, each student will get to attend one. As far as basketball, NCAA announced last week that November 25th is as early as games can start. No word on an official schedule for either the men's or the women's team. So we're just kind of holding right now and seeing what that schedule will look like. I know the Big 12 announced that they're going to try to start even playing some conference games in December. So I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC tried to do something similar, where maybe a couple of non-conference games in November, and then start the conference late in December. And then as far as I know with basketball, the spring will still look similar. So unlike volleyball, where they've kind of shrunken it and moved it, I think basketball is just kind of chopped off the first part of that. But retention is great. I was, as Ben was talking about the R&B numbers, I pulled up the Hogwild roster. We're right around the same numbers that we've seen in the past couple of years. The excitement from both the returning members and the new members has been great. Two of them had knocked on my door since this meeting started, trying to get their shirts and their mugs. So excitement is high, and we're looking forward to have an opportunity to play.
Yeah, and this is kind of a longer range forecast of when we return to normal. But what is your philosophy on athletic bands, like basketball athletic bands? What do you see in terms of what you've seen, where you've been, and maybe what you'll do here?
The thing I really like about pep band is how close you end up being to the court, right? And so, as great as it is to have 70, 80,000 people in Razorback Stadium and a 350-piece marching band, there's something really intimate and powerful about 80 people right next to the court at a volleyball or a basketball game. So high energy, excitement, supportive nature, I'm all about that. I think a little bit more playing different styles of music. I think, this goes both ways. If you're able to play a lot of different styles, whether it's rock or funk or R&B, the fans enjoy that because you get a little bit more variety. And, for our student musicians, it's important, I think, to be able to learn and play those different styles. So it's this balancing act of education and support for the athletic teams that I think is really important.
Great. Yeah, totally agree. I want to turn now to J.R. Hinkson. He is the Director of Operations and works a lot with alumni and also students and scholarships. A lot of people are saying they can't come to Razorback Stadium this year because of social distancing. What are ways that they can still interact and support the program, JR?
I would say the biggest thing that we can do to support the band is just be active on social media. The students in the band pay attention to our social media. They're college kids, so they take it very seriously. They devote a lot of time to it. And, normally when you perform in a stadium, you have active feedback from listeners and audience members, but they're not going to have that on a scale that they have this year. So I think any interaction that you can have with our band members on social media is fantastic. I figure most of you here are familiar with our Instagram and Facebook and YouTube channel. I'll post it in the chat in case you don't know what those are. But we have a great team with the band of our photographers, Joe Swink and Karen Schwartz, take really great photos. It makes me realize how, coming from the 90s, being a band, how many pictures of myself I don't have in the band, and how great it would have been to have had a Karen and a Joe there to take pictures to, immortalize the experience. But they do a great job of taking those photos, putting on Instagram, Facebook, like them, share them, comment, be active. Students pay attention. They love that kind of stuff. They enjoy it. The Woolies, of course, are full steam ahead, putting band performances on the YouTube channel. So the University of Arkansas YouTube channel, share those videos, comment on them. Students pay attention, and it is a very supportive thing to do.
JR, this might be for everybody, but what are alumni events canceled this year? Has athletics talked anything about it? Is there any virtual thought going into alumni band?
Yeah, there was a mention of that in the chat here. Right now the alumni band has been canceled for this year, but our hope is to by October 17th, Ole Miss homecoming, to have some virtual alumni activities, so that those of y'all that are alums and want to engage with the band, we can do so in a virtual fashion. So my answer to that is stay tuned. Right now, no alumni band, but our plan is to is developing right now to engage alumni in some fashion during homecoming.
Great. Well, we'll be looking forward to seeing that in our emails, I'm sure. I want to swing back to Dr. Knighten and talk about as athletic bands or keep going, like we still have concert bands. And if Chris, if you wouldn't mind talking about what the program looks like right now across the concert bands.
Thanks. We normally have 2 concert bands in the fall and 5 in the spring. And we decided to move forward with those again in the fall. What was very different from the very beginning was, rather than have live auditions over 2 days, we auditioned about 100 students who wanted to participate in those 2 bands via video. They all submitted video auditions. We learned a lot about their apartments and dorm rooms through that process, but it went very smoothly. J.R. helped us set up a system where students could upload their audition videos directly into one folder. And so that may be something that we continue, especially as we go into the spring semester. We made the decision also to begin at least the 4 or 5 weeks with virtual instruction. One of the groups is still virtual now. Ben's group just started with live rehearsals. Ben and Jeff are rehearsing one of the groups, and with both groups, we'll have small chamber ensembles instead of large groups. They're socially distanced. Ben's group is rehearsing outside. We have reserved the Greek Theater and all the pavilions and the gardens. Unless something really changes significantly with the positivity rate on campus, we anticipate we will not rehearse inside at all this semester. In the Department of Music, there's almost no instruction going on in the building. No playing of wind instruments, no singing. We know that if there are performances in the Faulkner Performing Arts Center, there will not be audiences. They will be live streamed only. So with the bands, we've decided not to have a live stream performance. Instead, what we'll do is we'll have these smaller groups video recorded as we go through the semester. And then we'll gradually release those performances via social media. We're also looking at maybe having some pop-up performances around campus. Come hear 5 or 10 minutes of chamber music from students. And so it's been very different. The students, again, have been very receptive of that. In the case of wind ensemble, we're also having, in place of instruction with live ensembles, we've had guests join us from around the country who are talking about how they've carved unique career paths as educators or performers or arts advocates, things like that. Ben did a really interesting project with composition. So the curriculum is still there. It's not what it usually is in a large ensemble setting, but we still have instruction going on.
Definitely. Not what you expect, but definitely pushing forward. I want to open now just to the Q&As that have been put in the chat. Some of them might have been answered through further conversation, but JR, if you wouldn't mind picking some of those and pitching them to the panel, that'd be great.
Yeah, this was a good question. Ben, I know you addressed this a little bit, but I thought you might want to maybe expand on it a little bit. What are some changes that we've had this year for COVID that have been, I guess, somewhat forced upon us, that it turns out we actually like them, and we might keep them moving forward?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we've all become Zoom experts, and this has offered us an opportunity for us as a staff to meet with students more frequently. There was something that was always challenging for us during the year, and that was to have section leader meetings. With a leadership team of about 50 to 60 students, taking their time into consideration. And, knowing how busy they are, it was always nearly impossible to get 100% attendance at a section leader meeting. And even when we did, it was after rehearsal or right before rehearsal. And it was not, not the most productive place to have one. And, we were always kind of feeling rushed. And with this has allowed us to, okay, now we can schedule it at a time where anybody can attend. Even we've had students attend section leaders meetings, take a break from work in the parking lot at Walmart and log in on their car or, wherever they're attending. So this opportunity, this is something I think we're going to continue to carry on. Sections have been able to meet virtually and use that time to take care of any things that we can't do in person. So that's actually been really, really beneficial that I think we're going to continue to do.
Ben, could you also address the participation in the band? I guess our numbers, I think a lot of people that I've talked to, when they ask me about the band, they're like, are your numbers down? Because they just assume that because of the online nature of university learning that people might not be interested in marching band. But from my perspective, certainly scholarship numbers are numbers are relatively stable. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's not uncommon this year for a lot of bands around the country. Just about every band is, possibly experience a little dip in enrollment. Some of that was due, so there were a few students that maybe decided, well, this is not the year for me to do band, whether it was they're taking a year off from college or, they kind of saw what was going on and say, well, I may wait a year. So, we had a very small number of students do that. We had a few students who, once all modalities for classes were announced, they found that they didn't have any classes in person other than band, and a lot of those students were from out of town or even out of state. And we had a few students that said, well, it's just not financially possible for me to move, when this is the only thing I had. So we lost a small number of students like that. And then we had a group of students that wanted to take online instruction. So we have a separate course, marching band techniques for students who wanted to remain virtual. So I think that the combination of all of that, we maybe have slightly lower numbers than we would have, but again, retention is still quite high. And before all of this, I think we were on track to have a really, really high, a pretty big incoming class and a really large returning class. I mean, I think at some point in May, we normally have enrollment information and audition information done. I mean, we were in the 360s. I mean, some were really high. So it's just something that a lot of groups around the country and even universities are experiencing this year. So.
Ben, have we added any new stand tunes to the repertoire? And could you talk a little bit about the halftime music for Saturday?
Yeah, so our goal for this first game was to put together our traditional book, all of the things that you're used to hearing from the Razorback Marching Band. One of the things that was pretty remarkable when you look at the Razorback Marching Band, yes, it's September 26th, but think about the normal time the Razorback Band would have had to rehearse up to this point. And we've gotten to this point with, I would say, less than half of the time that we would normally have in a normal year. So that's one of the things, band in this day and age, we move a little slower than we normally have, and that's totally fine. That's what we need to do it safely. So at this game, you're going to see pretty much everything that you've heard from the Razorback Band. All of our stand tunes, we have everything in our book. The halftime show is going to be a John Williams / patriotic, we call it an American celebration. We knew that getting to this first game was going to be a challenge all in itself. So, this is our tribute to everybody that helped us get to this point, to all of the frontline workers, first responders, everybody that's made this opportunity possible for us. And it's just really fun music to play. One of my all-time favorite arrangements that we've played here, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I know some of you here in the Zoom may have played this. It was a good time to bring that back. And, you can't go wrong playing John Williams. That's always a lot of fun to play for us and a lot of for you all to hear, for audiences to hear. So that's this first game. And then stay tuned for the further games. I mean, we're going to continue to do new halftime music, new stands music. So after this game, you'll see the musical book continue to develop throughout the year.
Hey, J.R., could I chime in with something here?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. One of the questions that I've had from a lot of alumni is, how are the students doing? And Ben just hit on something that I wanted to reiterate, and that is that so many students in the band program don't have any classes that are face-to-face except band. That was really shocking to me at first. But, and I was very concerned, you know, the first time I drove out to marching band, it's pretty depressing to see half of the band on one side of the parking lot and half of the band over there. And you realize that they're never going to be together. But as I walked around, I realized it's just business as usual for them, plus masks. They're just as silly and goofy, and the work ethic is still very high. And they're loving what they do. And I think probably in some ways, they're even more appreciative of the chance just to get out, you know, of an apartment or a dorm room. We always have students every year that tell us band is their release from all of their academic studies and work. And I think for all of us now, it's a chance to get out and see other people and interact. So I think they're doing a great job. Randy, you mentioned this earlier in the chat. Band is one of the most touchy-feely things that we have, and for most of us that have been in band. And I think that we don't have as many of those opportunities maybe, but I think it's still there, and I think it's still going for the students.
I also want to mention, I talked about our Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, but for especially parents, I know we have a few parents of current members on here that haven't seen our smug mug that is also in the chat. Karen Schwartz puts thousands of photos in there, and she does a great job of just really inundating us and spoiling us with all the great photos that she does. And I know that all of our parents and members appreciate that. And I'm sure Wesley, her son, who's a trumpet player in the band, appreciates it as well to a degree. Let me see if there's anything else here. I think that's about it.
Well, I know a lot of people have a passing period for teaching coming up. I see somebody jumping off, but we'll send a follow-up email with the social media information as well as anything else the band would like to share. But I want to thank the panel for taking time. More importantly, I want to thank you for keeping our kids safe. A lot of that is thankless work, but it is the most important, and we want to thank you for that. Thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said, this recording will be posted to the Arkansas Alumni's YouTube page, so you can forward it to friends, or if it was just such good information, you can watch it again. But if there's no other questions or anything, y'all have a great day, and we're excited for Sam Pittman to take out a new version of the Hogs and go after Georgia.